Bipartisanship is rare in Washington these days, but two Illinois congressmen from opposite sides of the aisle have come together on the issue of classified documents. More specifically, they're proposing big-time civil penalties for anyone in power that mishandles those documents. This comes amid high-profile investigations involving former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden. And joining us are Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat from Chicago's North Side, and Congressman Darin LaHood, a Republican whose district stretches from Rockford to Peoria. We thank you both for being with us on this stormy Illinois evening. But first, Congressman Quigley, I have to ask about the news of the day, and that is the indictment of Donald Trump for his alleged role in a hush money scheme involving adult film star Stormy Daniels. Given all the investigations out there, do you agree with the Manhattan DA bringing these charges at this time?
Look, it's a grand jury that makes those decisions. I was a criminal defense attorney for a long time. I let them do their own legal process, and I can't spoil this kumbaya moment.
This kumbaya moment, bipartisanship, but I do have to ask, and I have to ask you, Congressman LaHood, you have experience as a prosecutor, your reaction to these charges?
Well, first of all, I think it's unusual. We haven't seen the indictment. Apparently, the indictment we're not going to see until next Tuesday. But I have real concerns about when our justice system, when you indict somebody and when it's politically motivated. And I put out a statement to that effect earlier today. A couple things to keep in mind, Paris. The former DA, Cyrus Vance, a Democrat, reviewed this case and decided not to prosecute. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York looked at the facts and evidence, decided not to prosecute. You have this prosecutor, Bragg, that comes in. George Soros gives him $1 million, and he decides to prosecute. I just have a feeling
though, that's misinformation. It's indirectly to an organization that has supported Alvin Bragg.
Right, but George Soros today didn't deny that he gave $1 million to this fund that helped him. The last point that I would make is, I think if this was somebody named John Smith, I'm not sure they would be prosecuting them 7 years later on a charge that's never been prosecuted in the DA's office before.
All right, well, let's move on to the bipartisanship, the kumbaya moment, as you were mentioning, Congressman Quigley. So you both have introduced this legislation to address the mishandling of classified documents. A lot at stake, obviously. So tell us what this bill would do specifically.
Sure. Currently, the prosecutors, the Justice Department, when they look at something like this, they only have the opportunity to press criminal charges. But what we've seen here, that's a pretty high bar. And if there's a lack of intent, a requisite intent, basically there's no accountability. So Representative LaHood and I decided, as members, a former member of the Intelligence Committee, there has to be some accountability. So it makes sense that there be civil penalties when it doesn't reach the level of criminal prosecution.
And Representative LaHood, what would these civil penalties be? And is there different standards here based on intent? Specifically, if someone intended to keep these records versus they just kind of, forgot that they had them?
Well, I think we realized there were loopholes in the law, and there was nothing that addressed carelessness, negligence, making a mistake, sloppiness, which we don't know the end of the investigations when it comes to President Biden or Vice President Pence or former President Trump. We'll see what happens with there. But there clearly is deficiencies in the law. And so what Mike and I did in a bipartisan way is came together and said what we can do to fix this. So the civil penalties are a punitive measure that prosecutors will now have as another tool in their toolbox, or the U.S. Department of Justice, which would do the prosecution, that says, okay, maybe it's not intentional, maybe you didn't have knowledge, but we're going to fine you with a civil penalty up to $500,000 for each count. And then secondly, if in fact, moving forward proactively, if you don't go through the proper certification process for classified documents, you could potentially have your pension reduced as a government official, lose your security clearances. And these are measures put in place, again, to deter this type of activity.
Right, to deter this type of activity. Congressman Quigley, we've got the high-profile investigation of the Mar-a-Lago documents case with President Trump, former President Trump. Then all of a sudden, issues with President Biden when he was vice president, former Vice President Mike Pence, and classified documents. Why do you believe this has all started to bubble up now?
Happenstance. I think they're starting to look for this stuff, probably. And let me say, there's no excuse. Everyone who handles top-secret documents is told and trained over and over again how to handle these documents and how important it is. It's not just our national security at stake. It's the men and women who keep us safe. And it's those from other countries who help us. Their lives are at stake, and the whole system of cooperation that's involved that's so important to keep this country safe. So there's absolutely no excuse. Why it's happening now makes no sense. I think Darin and I will tell you, I've never seen it happen in 8 years as a member of the committee. Democrats and Republicans are trained hard on this, and the process in which we see classified documents is very thorough. I've never seen an oops take place among the legislative branch so far.
But obviously in the executive branch, a few potential oopses here. Congressman LaHood, there has been some flashes of bipartisan in this current Congress. Do you think that this bill will pass on a bipartisan basis?
I do. You know, when Mike and I got together and talked about this, we went to each of our, conferences and talked to our colleagues, whether it's on the Judiciary Committee or the Oversight Committee or the Intelligence Committee. And broadly, Republicans and Democrats said, yes, we need to do something about this. We need to fix the statute. We need to make sure this isn't happening. Because really, Paris, in the end, this jeopardizes potentially national security. The last thing we want to have is our sources and methods of our intelligence community exposed, have, for some reason, our nuclear codes exposed, having our CIA case agents somehow exposed. So those are the things we're thinking about, the national security of the U.S. And so it took us about 4 weeks to put this together, but I think it has broad bipartisan support. I know Mike and I look forward to moving it through the legislative process, getting a hearing on it, testifying, and hopefully getting it to become law.
All right, we'll see where that goes. Very quickly, Congressman Quigley, I want to pivot to an issue you followed, obviously, for a year, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The UN Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, said that human rights violations are shockingly routine by Russia. Are we in a stalemate here that's going to be perennial for the next several years, or how do you see this being resolved?
It doesn't have to be. And again, on a bipartisan basis, I know there are those, but I think they're on the fringes who have sought to end the funding of this conflict from the U.S. and the West side. What I see on the Democrat and Republican side is strong bipartisan support. But what did President Zelensky say when he came to D.C.? Help us win quickly. It's hard to fund and maintain support for any conflict for a long period of time. He said the same thing when I visited Ukraine over last summer. So I think we give them the weaponry they need to win this war as quickly as possible.
And we just had an interview with former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, who said this year and the coming months are highly critical in this conflict. All right, I have to leave it there. Congressman LaHood and Quigley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.